It's 3 a.m. You're awake. Again. Your phone is face down. Your room is dark. And your mind is already spinning through a quiet kind of panic. Something is wrong with you. That's what you tell yourself. Everyone else is sleeping straight through the night. You're broken. But you're not broken. You're remembering something. For almost all of human history, nobody slept in one solid block. Not your grandparents, not medieval farmers, not the first humans who ever lay down by a fire. They slept in two parts. And the space between those two parts wasn't a problem to be fixed. It was one of the most ordinary hours of the human day. Let that sit for a second. The thing keeping you up at night might not be insomnia at all. It might be biology doing exactly what it was built to do, thousands of years later, in a world that no longer has any use for it. Historian Roger E. Kirch spent over a decade digging through diaries, court records, medical texts, and literature from before the Industrial Revolution. He wasn't looking for anything about sleep. He stumbled onto it. Again and again, ordinary documents mention something called first sleep and second sleep, as if everyone already knew what that meant. A 1500s medical guide casually advised the best time to conceive a child was after the first sleep. Court testimonies described events happening between the sleeps. Nobody explained the phrase. Why would they? It was just how nights worked. Kirch found this pattern across hundreds of sources, from France to England to Africa. People went to bed shortly after dusk. They slept for 3 or 4 hours. Then they woke up. Not groggy, not distressed, just awake. And they stayed that way for an hour, sometimes 2, before drifting into a second sleep that carried them to dawn. What did they do in that gap? Almost everything you can imagine doing awake at night, except panic about being awake at night. They prayed. They talked with a bedmate about dreams they'd just had. While the images were still fresh, they had sex. They tended the fire. They visited neighbors. Some got up and did quiet chores. Farmers checked on animals. Others just lay in the dark, thinking, in a state some writers described as unusually calm and reflective. One 15th century monk wrote that this middle hour was the best time for prayer because the body was rested, but the mind hadn't yet been pulled into the noise of the day. There was even a name in French for this window, dorveil, a blend of sleep and waking. A third state that modern English doesn't have a word for because modern life stopped needing one. So what happened? Why did this disappear? The short answer is light. The longer answer is what light did to everything else. Before the 1800s, night was expensive and dangerous. Candles were costly. Oil lamps were dim and smoky. Streets had no lighting. Darkness pushed most human activity into a tight window around dusk and dawn, which meant the night stretched out long and empty, and sleep filled a good portion of it in 2 comfortable halves. There was time to spare in the dark, so the body used it. Then came gas lighting, then electric light, then factories running through the night, and shift schedules and clocks that didn't care what the sun was doing. Sleep stopped being something the night made room for. It became something squeezed into the hours light didn't already claim. One solid block, start to finish, as efficient as everything else the industrial world demanded. By the early 1900s, segmented sleep had all but vanished from memory. Doctors began treating the old pattern as a symptom rather than a norm. Waking in the night, once as unremarkable as feeling hungry at noon, was quietly rebranded as insomnia, a disorder, something to medicate away. Here's where it gets stranger. In the early 1990s, psychiatrist Thomas Weir ran an experiment that accidentally proved Kirch's history correct before either of them knew the other existed. Weir placed a group of volunteers in an environment with 14 hours of darkness every night, no artificial light, for a full month, essentially recreating a pre-industrial winter night. At first, the volunteers slept badly. Their bodies were still calibrated to modern light-drenched schedules. But within a few weeks, something shifted. They settled into a completely different rhythm. They fell asleep for about 4 hours, woke, lay quietly awake for 1 to 3 hours, calm and alert rather than anxious, then fell into a second 4-hour sleep before waking for the day. It wasn't insomnia. Left alone in darkness, without a clock or a phone or a reason to panic, human biology built the exact same 2-part night that Kirch found buried in 500 years of old letters and court records. Nobody taught these volunteers to sleep this way. Their bodies simply remembered. So why does the same pattern feel like a crisis now, in your bed, at 3 a.m.? Because the world around your bile